Welcome to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, John Tavaglione. He is a member of the Board of Supervisors in Riverside County. And sir, we are in the midst of the implementation of the Affordable Care Act.
Yes,
the healthcare exchanges went live on October 1st. Medicaid expansion begins on January 31st. Riverside County, one of our major counties in this state. Talk to us about the implementation process.
Okay, I think Brad, we're as prepared as we can be.
I understand.
You know, our regional medical center still has a lot of work to do, but in cooperation with our physicians, our physician groups, with Inland Empire Health Plan, which is our health initiative with Riverside and San Bernardino County, I think we're in good shape, and our clinics, of course, our network of clinics.
I must ask you about UCR Medical School,
yes,
which just opened. I know it just opened, but is UCR part of the solution?
Absolutely.
So how do we integrate UCR Med into this new landscape with the Affordable Care Act?
Well, it's going to be a process. Obviously, they have their startup process in which they're doing. This is their first year, of course, with the school and their students, but they will be an integral part of the Affordable Care Act and a partner with Riverside County.
Do you have a sense as to whether your constituents, which are, what is it, how many, 400,000, is that what you have?
450 in my district.
That's a large number. If they have a sense of what they can access now that the Affordable Care Act is going into place?
Well, they have been able, those that don't or have not had insurance, have been able to, over the last, since 2009, have been able to access through our low insurance health plan called LIHEAP, the plan, which was basically the precursor to get those uninsured into the process before the Affordable Care Act.
But here's the question. There are so many new avenues that the uninsured can take. Some may be eligible for Covered California, the healthcare exchange. Some may be eligible for that as well as a subsidy.
Correct.
Some may be eligible for the Medicaid expansion.
Correct.
Do you have a sense that your constituents are understanding the new landscape and how to access?
I think so. It's an ongoing process of education, and we at Riverside County are doing that within our organization. Of course, Covered California is doing a good job, and Inland Empire Health Plan, which I happen to sit on the board with, has been doing that for many, many years, and we continue to do that.
I want to shift gears, if I may, and talk about another issue that is very much on the minds of every member of any Board of Supervisors, and that is what we know as prison realignment and the California prison crisis.
Yes.
As we know recently, a federal court gave Governor Brown an additional month to contract the size of its prison population by about 10,000. Now, in some ways, that doesn't directly impact the counties because he has not indicated he's going to try to send those 10,000 down to the counties. But that being said, there is no doubt that prisons and jails are very much on the minds of every county.
Yes.
Talk to us about AB 109 and how it's playing out in Riverside.
Well, AB 109 continues to cause challenges for us here in Riverside County. Pre-AB 109, before it was even implemented, our jails were under a federal mandate to reduce population. So when AB 109 was implemented, we were found with the options of having to reduce even more prisoners to make room for those AB 109 prisoners if they were to reoffend. So we're pleased with what the federal courts did recently, basically in September, to give that 30-day delay. So it does impact us, and we're thankful that the governor has seen, as a result of AB 109, and the fact that, you know, those of us in county land told the governor that AB 109, if done well, could be effective because we at the counties know how to do things better in terms of rehabilitation and housing.
And one serves their sentences closer to home.
Correct.
And that helps with reintegration.
But all that you do good takes time and planning, and it was put on us very quickly. So now with some delays, and hopefully the courts will give them at this 3-year process of, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not optimistic.
I'm not either, but if we can, that'll give us more time. And as you know, as part of that compromise that the legislature came up with, that has that rehabilitation element
Right.
to it.
Yeah, I
as
mean,
well.
for our viewers, essentially, Senate Pro Tem Darrell Steinberg had negotiated a deal whereby monies would be spent over a 3-year period for rehabilitation programs,
Correct.
mental health programs, instead of spending that money on moving those
housing.
10,000 to other facilities.
Right.
The court essentially said, no, we'll give you another month. Why don't you negotiate with the prison rights advocates?
Yes.
So, query whether they'll extend that month beyond January of 2014.
I have a feeling the courts are going. This is my feeling.
Please.
My silver ball,
Right.
or
Magic, whatever it is.
whatever you call
8
it.
ball.
Yeah. I have a feeling that the courts have seen that we are doing everything we can as a result of AB 109, as a result of the governor and the legislature trying to come up with this compromise to work through this solution and do it
It's
well.
interesting you say that because, but for the decision where they did extend it for that 1 month, it seems to me the courts were not saying that because
You're right.
the language that they were using against the state of California was quite damning. I mean, they were calling California's efforts recalcitrant, intransigent. I mean, they were using every SAT word under
That's
the
right.
sun. This ruling did seem a little more accommodating, I guess you could say.
That's correct.
I do want to go back to the counties, though, because one area where the counties, I think, are really struggling is on the question of what qualifies as a triple non-sexual, non-serious, non-violent. Because the intent had been that sentences that were intended to be served for 3 years or less would go to the prisons, to the jails, the county jails, and everyone else would go to the prisons, the state
Correct.
prisons. But what's happened is that if someone is convicted of a crime that is not violent, it's considered non-serious. And so you're getting folks with sentences that are 10, 20 years
Correct.
that are serving their time in county jails.
Correct.
It's most often, we see it in the area of drug trafficking.
That's correct.
There was no gun. It was just, they had 200 pounds of cocaine.
That's right.
And so here they are in a county jail.
That's right, and there lies the dilemma for counties. County jails are not built as prisons.
Right.
County jails are built for short-term housing, basically a year, maybe 18 months while they're going through the trial process. So we don't have all the recreation, we don't have all the medical facilities, et cetera. And that's where the problem lies. And you're right, you're exactly right. The first week of AB 109 and whatever month it was in
Right.
2011, I believe it was in June 2011, one of the first reoffenders, I believe it was in Kern County,
Right.
reoffended. They sentenced them to 22 months.
How about
22 years? Excuse me.
And I was reading recently that there's a Mexican drug trafficker serving 42 years in LA County.
Probably correct.
Apparently there are at least 1,300 inmates serving sentences of 5 years or more in county facilities.
And I know we have one in ours that is serving 12 to 14 years. I can't remember
What
the
do you
exact amount.
do in that case? What if they get sick? I mean, do you have a medical facility for someone that may need long-term care? What if they need chemotherapy or...
You prepare yourself for a lawsuit.
And that's the question.
That is the problem.
Because what counties are fearing is that they are going to be sued.
That's exactly
And they're
it.
going to be put in the same exact situation that the state was put in, which is they will be deemed to be violating, is it the Sixth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment?
And it's already happened. Counties are already being faced with lawsuits. Our county has already been faced with a lawsuit.
In addition to the consent decree from 1993.
Correct.
So-
on the same issues that the courts, that the states have dealt with the mental health and health of this.
Do you feel as if
prisoners.
Governor Brown is starting to recognize,
Oh, absolutely.
and are you
Yes.
all working collaboratively?
Yes. State sheriffs, state probations, California State Association of Counties, and the legislature and Governor Brown. Governor Brown, I believe, gets it now. They're moving a little slower for us, but they get it, I think, and we just need to push them along.
Okay, his name is John Tavaglione. He is a member of the Board of Supervisors in Riverside County. When we come back, we'll be speaking with one of his colleagues of sorts. His name is Stan Sniff. He is the sheriff for Riverside County. We'll get his take on the prison crisis in California. I'm Brad Pomerance. This is Charter California Edition.
In 2012, how many individuals were serving prison sentences in state or federal penitentiaries? 970,000, 1.57 million, 1.83 million, or 2.02 million? According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, 1.57 million individuals were serving prison terms in state or federal penitentiaries, a slight decrease from nearly 1.6 million in 2011.
Welcome back to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. As I said, we are now joined by Stan Sniff. He's the elected sheriff of Riverside County. And sir, we just spoke with Mr. Tavaglione, John Tavaglione, a supervisor in Riverside County, about AB 109 and the prison crisis in California. I want to talk to you as well about it. As I mentioned to Mr. Tavaglione, the federal court that's been overseeing the contraction of the state prisons surprisingly extended the deadline by which the state had to contract by about 10,000 by a month to the end of January. What do you think?
Well, I think it was a little bit of a surprise because that's completely different from their posture earlier.
Right.
But I'm not sure it's a bad thing in the grand scheme of things because I think it's complex and it's been difficult for the governor to sort out.
It's been very difficult for the governor, and it's interesting, as I was saying to the supervisor, the wording that the court had used in the past, calling the state recalcitrant and transigent, so it was quite a shock. That being said, the counties are still dealing with the question of how to address realignment. And I mentioned to Supervisor Tavaglione, there's now a notorious case out of LA County where, and I mentioned to you before we started, there's a Mexican drug trafficker, 211 kilos of cocaine, but no weapons on him. So the offense was considered a triple non, and so his sentence is 42 years in county jail.
Correct.
Jails that were built for a year, 18 months, maybe 2 years.
Well, originally they were designed to house misdemeanors that were sentenced up to 1 year.
So just a 12-month sentence.
Exactly.
So if you were the sheriff in LA County, how would you address this situation? I'm sure you have some long sentences as well, but...
Well, many of the sheriffs, myself included, have attempted to end up getting our legislative reps to make some changes. There have really been no changes, so it was good when the governor, if you remember a few months ago, finally acknowledged there are problems with AB 109 realignment.
And let me ask you, because I think we talked about this a few months ago. Back then, what we were discussing was this one-for-one swap, that if a county, because of the intricacies of the conviction, was being given a prisoner, an inmate that would serve more than 3 years, the state would swap and the county would get someone with a shorter sentence or a conglomeration of those to equal their sentence. But that plan didn't go anywhere.
No, it didn't go anywhere. And for Riverside County specifically, it didn't work well at all. Because we were so overcrowded. We ended up having to release almost 7,000. So we're like a full glass of water with more water being dumped in.
And of course, Riverside County is under its own court order.
Correct.
And you cannot top, I think, is it about 5,000 inmates?
No, actually we're capped at just short of 3,900, which is our capacity. And you actually never get to the actual capacity because you have to separate gang members, men, women. There's a lot of different separations.
So how are you dealing with long-term inmates? Do you know how many you have, kind of 5 years or more?
Well, at this point in time, and it changes, but at this point in time, 1 out of every 4 of our entire inmates are AB 109 directly.
Okay.
And those long-term ones are probably on the order of, in that system, about 300 or 400.
Okay, so those are
significant, though.
No, I understand. I mean, that's about 10% of your population.
Correct.
And so how are you dealing with that population? Because look, if you're in for 3, 5, 10 years, you, as I had mentioned earlier, you may need chemotherapy because you come down with cancer, or you're an asthmatic, or you have mental health issues that if they were in there for under a year, it wouldn't be something you had to deal with. So how are you dealing with it?
Well, it's difficult, and what's happening is with all the AB 109 inmates, they're filling up like silt in a river, the beds. And you got to remember, and we've talked about this before, that jails are like a giant washing machine.
Right.
It is the very front end of the booking system.
Right.
Most of them are transitioning through that on their way back and forth to court appearances. Usually over half the inmates in a county jail.
That's the intent.
Exactly.
And misdemeanors.
And misdemeanors. But it could be all the way up through a murder trial going on.
Pending.
Right, exactly, until they're sentenced.
Right, but that brings up this question about these 300 to 400 that you know are not transitioning out. You know they are in there for quite some time. I mean, maybe you haven't been pressed with this question where one of your long-termers has cancer.
Not yet, but we will. It's inevitable.
I mean, it is inevitable. So you have not had to deal with a medical crisis, for example.
No, but the issue of having a large number of them, well over the 3 years that we were all promised, that has turned out to be myth. There are a significant number of them that exceed. They may not be 42 years, they may not be 10 years, but they're 6, 7, and 8 years, and you tie those beds up.
So are you looking for a fix on this very question of these long-termers? Because the intent, look, we always heard the number 3 years. And that was the intent, even though the prisons or the jails were meant for a 1-year term, that 3 years or less.
Well, the overall strategic direction of the department is, one, we got to expand the jails mightily to take care of the
jails, right.
It's got to have more capacity. But the other issue is we need to get legal redress from the legislature on better fine-tuning it. Most of the ones beyond 3 years were completely unexpected and unintended consequences by not reviewing and passing that law too quickly.
I want to ask you about certain solutions that are being adopted by other counties. For example, LA County, I was reading that recently they entered into a contract whereby about 500 of their inmates in the jails are going to be going to government-run firefighting camps.
Yes.
I think that Riverside, did they steal it from you?
We were the first.
You were the first. So I wanted, but tell me more about that, because to me it's I mean, look, I try to be neutral, but it seems very innovative.
Right, and really when you think about that, that was one of the very first things, not just specific fire camps, but that the state would actually house some of our new inmates for us at our cost. And one of those, at their cost.
Okay, I see.
And so they would charge us rent to rent back space for inmates that they used to keep. Fire camps are a subset of that. And fire camps used to be staffed entirely by the state prisons of those non-nons to fight fires all over the state of California. Counties like ours, which was one of the very first because we're under such duress for overcrowding, we are now paying the state to have those low-level inmates that are now in our county jail be part of those fire camps.
Let me ask you, though, about this. I was speaking.
A bit of irony, as I might say.
I was going to say. I was speaking with Lee Baca, your counterpart in Los Angeles County, and we had been discussing these firefighting camps. And it seems to me that you're providing these inmates with tremendous skills. I mean, they really are learning a lot if they're going to these camps.
Sure.
Is there any way for them to transfer those skills once they leave? I mean, are you putting them on a path towards a career as a firefighter?
Well, I, for one, think that we are.
Right.
Now, not all of them are going to qualify at that,
Right.
but I think clearly that's been the discussion in those circles, including in the firefighting circles, that does give them a marketable skill.
Right, but do they wind up being excluded because they have this criminal record?
Well, that remains to be seen. But I think if you look at the interest in the direction of what AB 109 realignment was about, it was to break that cycle of recidivism.
And you would hope to get them
Correct.
into a life being a
productive
member of society.
Absolutely.
So, as part of this court ruling, where the court did extend the time till the end of January to contract the prison, the hope had been of the legislature, primarily driven, as I mentioned, by Darrell Steinberger, the Senate Pro Tem, that money could be spent rather than sending it to private prisons or out of state for rehab programs, for mental health programs. If we do go down that path, what does that do to the AB 109 scheme? Because I believe that money would wind up in the state prison system, not the county jails. Is that right?
Well, I think it'll be sprinkled throughout.
It will, okay.
Yeah, because the whole issue would be to treat issues to change the path and direction of folks coming in early on. The problem the governor has, and most of us are pretty sympathetic, he's between a rock and a hard spot.
Right.
He's dealing with a crisis right now.
Exactly.
And so it's going to have to be a mix. Everybody gets breaking the cycle of recidivism, but you also have to be able to take care of the existing issue.
I want to get a sense from you. Do you think people realize, when I say people, kind of the general public, how serious this question is? I was speaking with Brian Mainshine, who's a Republican Assembly member out of San Diego, and he said this is the issue facing California today. I rarely hear people recognizing that fact.
Well, I can't speak for the other counties, but I'm almost nonstop out among Riverside County community
Which is a
members.
massive county, by the way.
It is a big county, but I think it is. In fact, my discussions with a reporter yesterday from print media was a new opinion poll that was released
Oh, yes,
by
I
the
know.
public
Yes.
And it talks about the considerable fear of crime in the Inland Empire, specifically much higher than the rest of the state. And part of that's driven by too small a jail system and this issue of realignment that's overwhelmed us.
Are we ready to start building more jails? Not prisons, county jails.
Well, we are. And at our level, I can't speak to the state prison system, but at the county jail, We've now are adding more capacity to our jail in Indio. That'll be ready in early 2017.
Right.
We're also, the public debate now focuses on expanding the jail in Banning, our
Right.
Larry Smith Correctional.
Right.
And then the third piece of that is a bigger jail somewhere.
Okay, his name is Stan Sniff, Sheriff of Riverside County. When we come back, we'll speak with one of his colleagues. His name is Paul Zellerbach. He's the DA for Riverside County. I'm Brad Pomerance. This is Charter California Edition.
Which state is sending more people to state prison on a per capita basis? Louisiana, Mississippi, New York, or Texas? No state has a higher incarceration rate than Louisiana, with 893 people behind bars for every 100,000 residents.
Welcome back to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We have Paul Zellerbach with us now. He is the DA for Riverside County. And so I want to speak with you not only as the DA, but also as a former judge, if I may.
Sure.
And as you know, earlier this year, a federal court ruled that California had acted in an intransigent manner, recalcitrant. I mean, they used every SAT word under the book, as I said earlier in the program. So were you surprised when you heard that that same panel is giving California an extra month to negotiate and to try to deal with the overcrowding crisis?
No, I'm not surprised at all.
Really?
You know, given the history, one could
Right.
say they were surprised, but given the recent events wherein the governors reached out to certain members of the legislature in Sacramento, and they're trying to work out some sort of compromise, that's the first time the court has seen that on behalf of the governor's office. And so I think the court may be a little more receptive to giving the governor more time.
Now, the question becomes, though, that the governor's been given a month. That's not a lot of time to figure out what to do with almost 10,000 prisoners that the court has ordered be, I don't want to say released, but that there needs to be a contraction of the current state prison system.
The court has ordered that the state of California reduce its prison population by
Right.
9,600 inmates. And, you know, even though the court is willing at this point in time, I think, to give the governor a month, if the court sees significant progress.
And that's what I wonder, yes.
I think the court may be willing to extend that.
But what does progress mean? Is progress that the governor's team and the prison advocates team are negotiating?
That's part of it.
Yeah, I'm not clear what progress would be.
Well, I think they could submit some sort of temporary proposal or alternatives or options to the court. And again, if the court sees that kind of movement or progress, it might be willing to extend the deadline.
Because what's interesting to me is the governor's plan that some would say was forced upon him by the Senate Pro Tem Darrell Steinberg and presented to the court was essentially, we don't want to have to spend $300 to $400 million to house these 9,600 in private prisons or out of state. We want to spend it on rehabilitation, on mental health programs. Now that feels good, arguably, but we've heard that, we've danced that dance before.
Well, and if you're law enforcement, that doesn't feel good.
Right.
You certainly, these are violent, serious offenders. We've already released the nonviolent ones back to the counties.
Right, yeah, so this is, you speak the truth. These are the
hardcore.
yeah, they're not the three nons.
Correct. They're the hardcore criminals, and we don't want to release 10,000 of those folks back
Right.
into our cities.
Right. So, again, I go back to this question: is what is progress? Because what the governor and the Senate Pro Tem seems to want, at least publicly, is this plan whereby we wouldn't spend money on rehousing them, but we'd spend money on programming.
Well, what I've suggested is the best of both worlds. Let's have a short-term plan in mind wherein we house those inmates continually, but let's have a long-term plan in place as well to deal with realignment and its effects upon the counties.
And let's talk about the effects on the counties, because that has been a huge source of friction between the 58 counties in California and Sacramento. I spoke earlier with Mr. Sniff, Mr. Tavaglione, both Riverside County elected officials, and what's caused them amongst the most angst is the notion that individuals that are convicted of crimes that don't include violence, could be major drug trafficking, for example, they're being sentenced to county jails regardless of the length of their terms, just because they didn't have a violent weapon on them, for example. So that's been
Really, it's even worse than that.
Please.
Because realignment only deals with the current charge or conviction. It doesn't deal with their past. So an individual could have a drug offense this time,
Right.
but could have rapes, robberies, whatever in their past, and they're still one of the 3 nons who, when they get sentenced, go to county jail rather than state prison.
The challenge also becomes is that these sentences are longer than intended. When realignment was put into play, the intent had been, as I understand it, under 3 years, serve your time in the county. Over 3 years, let's go to the state.
Well, that's why I co-authored the bill with Senator Bill Emerson.
Right, and I wanted to ask you about that.
That would mandate or require that anyone sentenced to more than 3 years, regardless of what their crime is, regardless of the offense or their criminal history, that they serve that sentence in state prison, not in county jail.
And that bill was getting some traction, but it didn't go anywhere in the end because were you not looking at a swap that with the state and the counties?
Ultimately, we negotiated a swap or a trade wherein the counties would receive an inmate who was going to be released within a year,
Right.
and the state prison system would take the long-term inmate.
But it didn't go.
Well, it didn't, but it's a 2-year bill now, and we're coming back in January.
Okay, so you're hopeful
to revisit that.
that it will move forward.
Absolutely.
I'd like to talk about a specific crime, if I may, and that is, in my opinion, one of the most devastating crimes out there, and it's known as domestic violence crimes. It's crimes committed by people that you know. And you have been looking at trying to combat domestic violence as a DA for your entire tenure.
Correct.
Talk to me about domestic violence, what it is, what the trends are, and what you hope to do.
Well, first and foremost, the Riverside County DA's office opened our third our Family Justice Center
yes.
dealing with domestic violence victims.
Right.
We had one in Riverside, we had one in Marietta, and I was able to open one earlier this year in Indio for the Coachella Valley.
Right.
There was a desperate need there.
And what are those centers exactly?
Those are centers, they're collaborative efforts with law enforcement, with nonprofit organizations, Rape Crisis Center, Alternatives to Domestic Violence, the Shelter from the Storm in the Desert. And it's a one-stop shop for victims of domestic violence. They can file police reports there, make police reports. We can give them temporary housing, clothing, shelter.
And sadly, those centers are very busy.
They're very busy.
And is it fair to say that maybe one of the reasons they're so busy is the last few years, tough economic times, and that can bring about increased drinking, increased drug use, which leads to violence against your loved ones?
There's no question that's part of it, but I think we're doing a much better job at raising awareness in the community, as well as empowering domestic violence victims to come forward and to understand and appreciate they don't need to continue to put up with the abuse.
But here's the challenge. So many of these domestic violence victims, often women, often younger, and often have absolutely positively nowhere to go and no source of income. And if they leave their abusers, they really feel as if they're trapped.
No question, we see that day in and day out. But when you realize that 25% of the female population in this country experience some form of domestic violence in their lives, that's got to stop. And the only way it's going to stop is by them coming forward, making a change in their life, empowering them, giving them tools and opportunities to live somewhere else, to get a restraining order, to fight back in essence.
And so are you seeing that tools like the Family Justice Center, are they working? Are you able to actually extricate these women from, and men for that matter, but men, women, children, whomever they may be, from these untenable situations?
I think we're making great success, but we continually need help from the public.
So how can we help you?
74% of us in society know someone who has or is currently experiencing domestic violence.
Really?
Whether it be a family member, a friend, a coworker, and we need to be aware of that. We need to reach out and help those people, because sometimes you're right, they can't help themselves, or they're not in a situation where they're able to do that. So it's incumbent upon us as friends, as family members, as coworkers, to reach out to those
it's so
people.
interesting. So often it's, I don't want to get involved. It's not my place. It's not my responsibility.
We're beyond that now as a society. I think certainly with respect to domestic violence, child abuse, crimes like that, we need to get involved.
And so how can we? I mean, would it be appropriate to speak to the victim, the abuser, call talk to someone, a faith-based organization, the DA's office?
All the above. Each situation is unique. Each victim is in a unique situation. But I think we need to do something.
For our viewers who may live in Riverside County, is there a special hotline you can provide us, or just?
There's Family Justice Center numbers.
Okay, we'll put that on the screen for sure.
Absolutely. And again, those are now regionally in Murrieta, Riverside, and Indio.
Okay.
And they're
Thank you for that.
willing to help
Thank you
out.
so much. His name is Paul Zellerbach. He is the DA for Riverside County, running for re-election, which will be held in June 2014. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's Charter California.